because he was the son, and he had sons. You know their names?
That's for the musical people. And Merari or something like that.
Uh-huh. Okay. Now, out of those three, who are we going to focus on? We know.
We're going to focus on Moses.
Okay. And which son would that be? So we went from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Jacob's son. Now, which one are we going to follow now?
Was he from the Kohathites?
The Kohathites. So this is where we're going down. So Kohathites had this is the one we want to focus on. He had three other sons. He had three others. But this is the one we want to focus on. And why do we want to focus on Amram?
Because that's going to be the father of Moses.
Because he was the father of Moses. So, Kohath had, what was his sister's name? What was Kohath's sister's name?
Jezebel.
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay.
Uh-huh. So that was Kohath's sister. Now, what brings her into the picture?
So that's Moses' mom.
And who's Moses' dad?
Moses' dad was
him. So these two got married. Okay, is that making sense?
Yeah.
So we know Levi was one of the 12. He had 3 sons, but we're focusing on Kohath because that's the one that's going to bring us down the line to Moses. Kohath had Amram, and Kohath had a sister named Jochebed. These two got married and had who?
Moses, Aaron, and Miriam.
Who came? What order?
Aaron, Moses, Miriam. Oh no, Miriam.
How come it couldn't be Miriam? How come Miriam couldn't be last?
Because she got him out the river and was his babysitter.
See, so she stood back as the baby was in the river, waiting to see. So if the baby was in the river, she had to be older. Mm-hmm. So that would make her the oldest. So what was the order?
I don't think Moses was the baby then.
Miriam, Aaron, and Moses. Okay. See, so that was the order. All right. So he married his auntie. So this was an auntie and a wife, and they had these 3. Now, who do we know? What causes Aaron to stand out? Aaron married Elizabeth, and what happened to 2 of their sons? Nadab and Abihu. They trying to play with God. They term it as strange fire, and they died. And they had 2 other brothers, Eleazar and Ithamar. And the Lord commanded Ithamar to not even mourn for his brothers. So some things are just so terrible. God don't want you wasting energy. Oh, he's gone, God forbid him to even mourn for his brothers. I said, wow, because God knew their nature. Okay, so now we go back to verse 1. And there went a man out of the house of Levi, we know, one of the 12, and took a wife of the daughters of Levi, and that would be still in the line of Levi, because that was a sister. Okay, what's the rest of that verse? Read that. What does it say? Is that it?
Yes.
And there went a man out of the house of Levi and took a wife of the daughter. Now we know who they are. Jochebed was the mother and Amram was the father. Amram was a grandson. He was a grandson of who? Amram was a grandson of
Jacob.
Who was your grandson? Who was this to him?
So he was a grandson to Levi.
Right. So this was his father, right? This is one of Levi's sons. He had Amram, so this is Amram's father. And Kohath's father was Levi, which made Amram grandfather. So this is a grandfather to him. Okay, so Amram was the grandson of Levi and the son of Kohath. All right, and how was he related to Aaron and Miriam? How was he related to them?
Was their father?
Those were his children, right? Okay, so we kind of get the picture, because when the preacher's up preaching, I like to kind of I say, okay, I know who those are, you know. So we know now, okay. So Kohath was the second son of Levi. And as you said, the Kohathites, is that how you term them?
Kohathites.
The Kohathites. He was the leader of them. You know, all the ites, the Jebusites, Perizzites, Canaanites, Avites, all the Vites. All right. All right. So Jochebed married her nephew, and the sister, he married the sister of his father. Okay, verse 2, and the woman conceived and bare a son, and when she saw that he was a goodly child, she hid him for 3 months. Now, who did she hide?
Moses.
So we're really talking about Moses here. He was a goodly child, and she hid him for 3 months. Is that typical? You have a baby and you hide him? That's not typical. You said, we just had a baby. Come see the baby. You know, today is Father's Day, and they were showing the fathers on a TV holding the baby. So she hid him for 3 months. So this was the second son and the third child. He was the second son because Aaron was the first son, but he was the third child of the three of those, okay? And when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrush and daubed it with slime and with pitch and put the child therein, and she laid him in the plagues by the river bank. Why? Why would you put this child in a little boot and put him in the river? What river was it?
Nile.
The Nile River. That's what she did with him. Okay, we'll read on and see. Because the last chapter of last week, what did it tell us? What did Pharaoh say with that last? Kill all the sons. Kill them. If they sons, kill them. All the Hebrew. Why?
They were multiplying and they were going to be bigger.
They're going to be bigger, and underlying theme is we're trying to get to Jesus. And Jesus had to come through these lines. So if I kill you, then there's no chance of you having a son that's going to have a son that's going to have a son that's going to be Joseph, that's going to be Jesus' father. So I got to stop it. If I can stop it there, I won't get the Messiah. And whose idea was to kill? Who's always the enemy and want to destroy anything about Jesus? The devil, Satan. Anytime an idea is fighting against the Lord, you know it's the enemy. You know it's the enemy, all right? So Pharaoh had given the orders in the last verse of last week. Why did he give that order to kill him? What was his first request? What had Pharaoh said initially last week? And that didn't happen. Now he's making a proclamation. So what was his first plan?
With the midwives.
With the midwives. When they having the babies, kill him then. And did the midwives adhere to that?
No.
No, they didn't, because they feared God. Not the king, but God. And it's better to fear, which one should you be really fearing? God. You should really adhere to what God say, not man. So the midwives didn't listen to even the king when he said, as soon as they are born, kill them. And they said, okay, they strong. When we get there, the baby's already there. So, okay, that plan didn't work. Now he's just doing a proclamation, no matter how old they are, If it's a boy, kill him. And this is not working either for this little particular child, is it? Because we're talking about who? Who was in this little boat? Moses. All right. So we're looking at the faith of a woman that don't know really what to do, but underlining God is the one that's directing her. Do we ever get to a point where we don't know what to do, or we know everything?
Clueless.
We're clueless. We don't know. So what do we do when we don't know what to do?
Pray.
Do we? Do we go to God? Is that our next step? Or do we try another dumb plan? More likely we try another dumb plan. And finally, we'll cry out and say, oh, God, help me. All right. And the sister stood afar off. Who?
The sister.
What's her name?
The first name might be
Miriam. She stood, so the mother done put the baby where?
in the Nile.
In the Nile, in the basket, done pitched it so it don't leak, got it all set. And the daughter stands afar off to see what's going to be done with her, what?
Brother.
Her brother. Okay, verse 5, and the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the riverside, and when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. Now, when the mother put this baby out there, she never could have imagined how God was going to work this out. Do we need to know how? What do we need to do? Trust and have faith that I don't know how God going to work this out, but God, I know you're going to work this out. That's only thing he's asking us to do is have faith in him. Have faith in God. For without faith, what? Impossible to please God. You want to please God, you got to have faith. You got to believe in him. Believe that he is. Do everybody believe that there's a God? What are their names? Atheists. There is no God. Would you let that come out your mouth? There is a God. And you got to believe that he is and that he's a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. And that's where we stand. That's our stance. That's my story. And what? I'm sticking to it. No. So Moses' mother couldn't even imagine how God was going to work this out. But she did what she know to do. And somebody says that all the time. Do what you know to do that's right. And trust God for the rest. Because once we do what we know to do, that's all God wants you to do. That's all he wants you to do. Do what you know to do. If it's right, do it. He'll take care of everything else. But God moved. He had impeccable what? At this point, the baby's in the river. Did he stay in there 5 or 6 days? So he had impeccable what? Timing. What else?
Foresight.
Is it either? What else? Went to the wrong river. Was that the case? The woman went to the wrong river? So location, place. What else can we stick in there? Impeccable timing, foresight, the place, and maybe Hebrew hater went to the river. So the right person went to the river, right? The right person. Who was that right person? Pharaoh's daughter, the right person. So all of this was in place. Okay, so the 6th verse says, and when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. And she had compassion. What is compassion?
Like a sorrowfulness or a tender heart for something.
A tender heart. She had compassion and said, this is one of the Hebrew children. I mean, this just like, what started happening to me then, you think? Smoking, standing there. Because God's divine navy floated on the tears of the baby's cheek. God's navy came to the rescue. On the tears of the baby's cheek, he wept, and she had compassion for him. And this very act of having compassion, what was the domino effect of this compassion? Far-reaching domino effect of this compassion. Where do your mind go?
She fell in love with that baby.
She fell in love with the baby, and this very act laid the foundation to defeat Satan. Because God had predestined for this child to live, and he had an assignment for him, and God worked it, the puzzle pieces where this Egyptian princess gonna have compassion on a Hebrew baby? You know, that don't mix. So that was far-reaching. Compassion was far-reaching there. It was the preservation of a nation. It was the fulfillment of prophecy. It was the furtherance of God's plan for the coming seed. All of that kicked in because she had compassion. Isn't that somehow God can use one thing to get you where you need to be? When I first started working, I worked at Spiegel, way on Rockwell. Anybody know where Rockwell is? Way west. Way west. That's where I worked. Well, Alice Chalmers was 2 minutes from my house, and I wanted to work there. But I had to pass Alice Chalmers to go way on Rockwell. And every day I would say, Lord, I want a job in there. Lord, I want a job in there. And I fill out all kind of applications for that job. They called me in one time, and another lady got the job, and I was kind of upset. Deacon Cantrell's wife, Connie, got that job. I said, now, why did she get the job? I want a job in there. As it turned out, it was a temple job, and they laid her off like 3 months. Well, the Lord knew that wasn't for me because I needed a permanent job to raise my kids. And I had filled out so many applications, so the next time they called me in there, I didn't have to even fill out the application. They just assigned me to an area, and I worked there 10 years, and it was the goodness of God that got me in that place. But you have to be persistent and seek God and do something yourself, and the Lord will bless you and open a door for you. Okay, verse 7, then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter. Okay, now here's another thing that gets the smoke going. What did she say? What did the sister say? So who was this sister? What's her name? Miriam. So what did Miriam say to Pharaoh's daughter?
Shall I go and call to me a nurse or the Hebrew woman that you may nurse a child for thee?
Little innocent question. Should I go get somebody? Pharaoh's daughter don't know what at this time?
Nothing.
She doesn't know that this is the sister. She don't know that she's talking about, let me go get our mother. But you see how God, I use the word all the time, how God what? Orchestrate things for us. He'll do it. He will orchestrate things that will blow our mind, and we don't even, we say, oh, I didn't think of that. No, you're not God. Our mindset can't even compare to his mindset. So she's asking an innocent question here, and God is working His plan. He's working His plan. This was a divinely timed arrangement. The timing was impeccable. God worked it out so that His own mother was the one that brought him up. And Pharaoh's daughter said, go get somebody. Good idea. Evidently, she hadn't even noticed that this girl was standing over there the whole time. Go get somebody. And the maid went and called the child's mother. Isn't that amazing? And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee what?
Wages.
I'll pay you for it. And the woman took the child and nursed it. She was taking care of her own baby, and she was getting a state check to do it. Isn't that amazing? Can't God just work it? God can work it. When I read these lessons, it encouraged my heart. If He did it for them, He'll what? He'll do it for me. He'll do it for me. God can do anything but fail, and I don't have to know or try to figure out how He's going to do it. We go back to the same thing. Our responsibility is what? To trust Him. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh, and he became her son. So how old do you think he is here? So why did she take the baby in the first place? He needed to be nursed. He was a baby, 3 months old. They needed somebody to nurse the baby, wean the baby. So this time, and the child grew, now he's weaned. And how long was it usually? 3 to 5 years. 3 to 5 years before a baby was weaned back then. So she brought the baby back to Pharaoh's daughter, and the child became Pharaoh's daughter's son. And she called his name Moses, and she said, because I drew him out of the water. So she raised him and groomed him and educated him with what in mind? What did she have in mind when she was doing all of this? He was going to become a good Hebrew. He was going to become a good Egyptian. He was going to be the head of state. He was going to be Pharaoh's successor. He was going to be in charge. So she was doing all of this, grooming him for that. But God had a different plan. And out of all of this whole chapter, not much is said about the palace of Pharaoh. This one verse, the 10th verse, is the only verse in here that's even focusing on that. So God didn't have a lot to say about those years, did He? He jumps way up in 11. We jumped 45 years. So one verse he spends on telling you about the child grew and the mama, who the mama was, and she called his name and she was grooming him. So, because that was not what God's plans were for him, not to be a successor of Pharaoh, not to be the head of state, not to be in charge, but God had another plan for him. Then we go to verse 11, and it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown. So now we done skipped from the 5-year-old baby, the 10-year-old child, the 15-year-old child, all the years he spent there being taught and educated up till he's grown. And how old do you think he was? Let's read a little further, then we're going to start calculating. And it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown that he went out unto his brothers and looked on their burden, and he spied an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren. And this is the time when he said, Hebrew was saying he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer the afflictions with his people rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. And then when we go to Acts 7 and 23, what does that say? Acts 7 and 23. What does that tell you?
And when when he was full 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brethren, the children of Israel.
Does that sound familiar? And what else does that tell you that it doesn't tell you in the 11? His age. You see, so now he's 40 years old. So time has passed, but he got all the upper crust training, all the knowledge. People envied him and feared him because he was a head of the Egyptian army. He defeated the Mesopotamians, and he was renowned and he was known, kind of like Joseph in his day. Joseph was second only to the king. Moses was right up there because he was Egyptian. His mother raised him as an Egyptian. So now we see that he's 40 years old. And he looked this way and that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Now, what did he think? What was on his mind here? What was he thinking? He thought his brothers was going to understand. I'm trying to help y'all. I'm taking up for you. So, but he hid him, so that's saying, it's kind of undercover. So he thought his brothers would understand that it was his job to deliver them. But was this the work of God, or was this the work of the flesh?
What?
The flesh. And what happens when we come up with our own plan?
Fails.
Disaster is going to happen. Ramifications going to kick in. So it wasn't God's timing. It wasn't God's timing. God chose him, but it wasn't God's timing. And God didn't tell him to go kill this man and go hide him in the sand. So it was fleshy. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together, and he said to him that did the wrong, wherefore smite thou thy fellow? And he said, who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killed the Egyptian? So the brothers weren't happy or impressed by what he did. So you killed him yesterday, and so you're going to kill us today? And Moses feared and said, surely this thing is known. They not responding the way I thought they were. I thought they would be happy that he was smiting you all, and I came to your rescue. Now, when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. And he sat down by the well. Now, Midian, what comes to mind?
Jacob stayed there for a while.
Jacob, who was whose son? That would be a good one. Whose son was this? You look and see Midian. No, I don't see it there. Whose son was this? That'll be a good one to know. Whose son? Okay. Did I write that scripture down? Let's see. How many wives did Abraham have? At least three. Who were they?
Ishmael's mother.
That was the second one. Who was the first?
Their daddy took on another one.
And Hagar went in a different direction with Ishmael. Who was the third one? Starts with the K. Kamisha.
Oh, yeah.
Remember? He had about 6 kids by them. Genesis 25. Let's see. That's right. Go to Genesis 25. So Sarah, Hagar, and Keturah. Genesis 25 tells us what? 25 and 1.
Then again, Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah.
And they named the kids?
And she bare him Zimram and Jokshan and Midian and Midian.
And who?
Midian.
Midian, that's bringing in here. So that was Abraham. And Keturah. That was their son. So you see how you're going back and you're picking up the different ones. So Midian was the fourth son of Abraham and Keturah, and you named him. He was the fourth one. Now the priest of the Midians, he was the priest, had how many daughters? Verse 16.
7.
Okay. So the priest had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the trough to water their father's flock. Who was their father? Who was this Midian? Who was the 7 daughters' father? Jethro. So was that the only name he had? Euel. So, but we know him more familiar by Jethro. Okay. So he was a descendant of Abraham and Keturah. And he knew the true and living God. They stayed true to form. And the shepherd came and drove away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered the flock. And when they came to Reuel, the father, he said, "How is it that ye come so soon today?" They finished their chores early. In times past, other shepherd keepers would bully them. They draw the water, and they would take their water and water their flock. And they would have to redraw water, and it would take them a long time. But today, it didn't take long at all because they had somebody to be there for them. And they said, "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hands of the shepherd, and also drew water enough for us, and watered the flock." So, why did they think he was an Egyptian? And they said, "An Egyptian." Who were they talking about? Moses. Why did they think he was an Egyptian?
He had been raised as one.
He had been raised as one. He probably had the clothes of one. He looked regal, and he didn't look like a shepherd. He was born in a palace, and he carried himself that way. So she thought he was an Egyptian, and the guys that didn't take the water this time, they recognized him as an Egyptian because they backed off and said, "Oh, this well-trained military man, we better leave him alone." So they backed off and didn't bully the sisters to take their water today. So when they got home early, the daddy said, "Why y'all home so early?" He said, "This Egyptian helped us out." And the daughters, and he said unto the daughters, "Where is he?" So what was it the custom of back that time? Somebody do something kind, you do what? You invite them home and feed them. And so he said, "Where is it? Why is it that ye have left the man? Call him, that he may eat bread." And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses who? Who did he give Moses?
Oh, yeah. His wife.
Moses and Zipporah. We going on down the line. We have gone through a lot of descendants, but we kind of see where they're coming from, don't we? And that's important, that we want to keep in line where they're coming from. So Moses and Zipporah now is coming into play. All right? And she bare him a son. This is verse 22. And what was his name? For he said, I have been a stranger in the land, in a strange land. So, firstborn to Moses and Zipporah was Gershom. And who else had a son named Gershom?
Levi.
See? Did you see that? So some of these names are being repeated, aren't they? You sure did. And it came to pass in the progress of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of bondage, and they cried, and their cries came up unto God by reason of their bondage. Why were they crying? Why were they in bondage? They started off being free and happy and doing everything. Why were they in bondage? What happened along the way? Slaves, because a king rose up that knew not Joseph. Remember last week? Knew not Joseph. And they said, let's deal wisely with these people. Let's put stuff on them because they are multiplying too much. And we got to put a stop to this. They get larger than us and they'll take over and take our land. Now when things were like Joseph, when everything was good and they were in Egypt, do you think they would have left? Not likely. When things going well, we have a tendency to what?
Linger.
Ride, linger. Everything's well. It's not broke. Why fix it? You know. So God sometimes, past masters were put in place. They were under bondage, and they cried out because why couldn't they stay there? It wasn't part of whose plan? Whose plan was it for them not to stay there?
God.
It was God's plan because he had told them what? I'm giving you Canaan. This is Egypt. You can't stay here. If everything had been well, why leave? Everything's okay. So God allowed these things to come upon them, and it says they cried out, and their cries came up to God. Do you think sometimes the Lord allowed difficulties in our lives in order to get us in line with his will? He allowed difficulties to get us in line with his will. If everything going all right, I'll pray tomorrow, I'll be okay, but if things are not going right, somebody call, no, I don't feel like going nowhere. I need to be praying. We'll tell ourselves we need to be praying when things aren't going well. So sometimes afflictions and things are just a little nudge for us to recognize. Recognize who? Recognize God. And God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. Now, we don't know. They cried out, and it said, and they came up to the ears of the Lord. They may or may not been so dedicated to God and doing everything they should, but God had promised, and he was keeping his promise. God took the initiative to deliver them in view of his covenant and what he had promised them. And that's why it's so important for us to know the promises of God to us and cry out to him, because then he'll take the initiative to stand up for his own word. But a lot of times we don't even know what we got. We don't know what the promises are, so we can't recite them back to him to remind him. You ever gone in a store or asked something, and if you didn't ask the right question, they wouldn't tell you? That happens often. They'll just answer what you asked, and then you say, if I had known that, I could have done so-and-so. But a lot of people out there in the merchandising world don't tell you things that could be. If you do this, you could catch this sale. Oh, thank you. Some of them will, but a lot of them won't. Won't tell you nothing. So But we want to know the promises of God, know what we're entitled to, so when we get in the crunch, we can recite that back to God, and He gonna keep His promise. He's never gone back on His word. He never said, well, I changed my mind. Do we as humans change our mind?
All the time.
What are some of our reasoning for changing our mind?
It's too hard.
Too hard.
It's not worth it.
I forgot.
I'm tired.
My schedule changed. I mean, we'll change our mind over a little or nothing.
My place too far.
And we'll just change our mind, won't we? So God looked on the children of Israel, and God had respect for them. And we know that the number 5 is for grace. No moral excellency in the children of them. They weren't moral excellent in anything. So it wasn't because of them that God heard their cry, but because He loved them, because He loved us. He acknowledged their misery, and He reached out to them. So their cries came to Him. What else? He heard their groaning. What else? He remembered His covenant. He looked upon them, and He respected them. So there's 5 things He did to help these people that start crying out to Him when things got really rough. And 5 being, I think Duchess told us 2 or 3 Sundays ago, that 5 is grace, is grace. So God's grace is sufficient. God's grace is what keeps us going. And we walk therein. We're always covered by God's grace. Isn't that so? Any questions on that? So we got through the second chapter, going to 40, and we kind of know some of the people. Okay? Tell me something about Levi.
He was the 3rd son of Leah.
He was the 3rd son. Tell me something about Kohath. You think of anything here?
Moses. Yeah, grandfather.
Moses' grandfather. All right. Who was Moses' father? Who was Moses' mother? Who was Moses' sister and brother? Who was the oldest? Okay. Where did they take Moses after he was 3 months old?
To the Nile.
To the Nile to protect him. And this is so typical of God to have the what? The right timing, foresight, the place, and the right person. What one little word was the key to defeating Satan and taking us closer to the promised seed? What one word kicks in here relative to Pharaoh's daughter? Compassion. She had compassion. And because she had compassion, she told him to go get him. And the sister standing in the background, you want me to go get somebody, a nurse? Go get somebody. But the fact that she had compassion, she could have said, leave that baby in that thing. That's a Hebrew baby. My father said, kill them all anyway. Ooh. Because that was the order of the day, so she didn't even obey that order. Okay.
Do you know why or how Moses found out he was Hebrew?
We're going to read further down.
Was it something like his sister told him or something?
Could be. I haven't ran across it yet. Any history of that?
How Moses found out he was a Hebrew.
Because he defended his brethren. We'll keep that in mind and see if it pulls in answer on that. Yeah, how did he know? Why did he go defend them? Why didn't he stay in the role he was in? You know, because he had it good. He was rich. He was revered. He was known. He was in charge. He was powerful. All of that, you know. So we'll keep that in mind. We thank God for the pastor coming in. That concludes our Sunday school. We're moving right along to learn more about Moses and what's going on and get these people out of Egypt. But we got to go through a lot before we take that final walk, right?